Hello and welcome to Deep Dive on NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous. And on February the 19th, the geopolitics of the Middle East underwent a seismic shift, not on a battlefield, but in a boardroom, presiding over the inaugural meeting of the so-called Board of Peace at the Donald J. Trump U.S. Institute of Peace. The American president has set the stage for the largest reconstruction project in modern history. This is no longer just diplomacy, it is a multi-billion-dollar real estate and nation-building venture. Tonight we dissect the results of this high-stakes summit. The $10 billion American pledge, the nation signing to the stabilization force, and the blueprint for a new Gaza, first revealed in the snows of Davos. The atmosphere in Washington was more corporate than diplomatic, surrounded by allies like Hungary's Viktor Orban and Argentina's Javier Milei. President Trump positioned himself as the chairman of a global recovery body. The meeting marked the transition of the Gaza peace plan from a theatrical ceasefire into a concrete financial operation. But the true engine of this board is the sheer scale of capital committed. During the session, the financial bedrock for the post-war era was laid bare. As of February the 20th, the numbers stand as follows. The United States anchor, President Trump, pledged $10 billion from the United States. He described this as a small price compared to the cost of war, equating it to just 2 weeks of traditional combat spending. The coalition pledged 9 other nations, including the likes of the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kazakhstan, and Kuwait. They have all committed a combined $7 billion. Private sector interest also is included. FIFA president Gianni Infantino was present to pledge $75 million for sports infrastructure, signaling a broad effort to rebuild the social fabric through soft power investments. So where is this money going? To understand the final goal, we have to look back to January the 22nd at the World Economic Forum. In Davos, Jared Kushner unveiled the quote-unquote new Gaza master plan. It is a vision that replaces the image of ruins with renders of glass and steel. Kushner's plan treats the Gaza Strip not just as a territory, but as vacant beachfront real estate with untapped potential. The plan's core pillars include the coastal Riviera, the construction of 180 mixed-use skyscrapers along the Mediterranean coast, designed to transform the Strip into a tourism hub by 2025. The new Rafah follows in the south, a massive urban development project featuring 100,000 housing units, 200 schools, and 75 medical facilities. Industrial engines are also a key part. The establishment of data centers and advanced manufacturing zones in central Gaza, aimed at boosting the Gaza Strip's GDP to $10 billion within a decade. The trilateral crossing is a reimagined Rafah crossing that serves as a freight and logistics corridor linking Gaza, Egypt, and of course Israel. The Board of Peace has now formally adopted this vision as its operational roadmap, but as every builder knows, you cannot construct on unstable ground. The summit's most significant conclusion was the finalization of the International Stabilization Force, otherwise known as the ISF. This is the security umbrella that the board says is prerequisite for any private investment to flow. Under the command of Major General Jasper Jeffers III, the ISF will deploy in 5 sectors, starting with Rafah. Troop contributors include Indonesia, Morocco, Kazakhstan, Kosovo, and Albania. They've all committed a total of 20,000 soldiers. Deputy Command Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim majority nation, will serve as deputy commander, providing a sense of regional legitimacy to the force. Police training is also included, with Egypt and Jordan being able to train a 12,000 strong Palestinian civil police force to maintain day-to-day law and order. Trump remained blunt about the board's relationship with traditional institutions. He stated that the Board of Peace would be looking over the United Nations, ensuring it runs properly, or perhaps over time, replacing its role in conflict resolution entirely. Let's take a listen into his statements.
The United Nations will be, I think, is going to be much stronger. The Board of Peace is going to almost be looking over the United Nations and making sure it runs properly. But we're going to strengthen up the United Nations. We're going to make sure its facilities are good. They need help, and they need help money-wise. We're going to help them money-wise, and we're going to make sure the United Nations is viable.
Critics argue that the plan is top-down and disregards the indigenous social fabric of Gaza, turning the Strip into a corporate enclave. And the criticism is not just from fringe opponents of Trump's style of governance and politics. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been firm in his demand for demilitarized Hamas before any reconstruction can happen for Gaza, and apparently has an agreement with America on this matter. Let's take a listen in.
וסיכמנו עם ידידינו בארצות הברית, לא יהיה שיקום הרצועה לפני פירוז הרצועה.
However, the board's supporters point to the scale of the funding as the only realistic way to break the cycle of war and reconstruction. The conclusion from this first meeting is clear. The Trump administration is bypassing the multilateralism of the past in favor of a direct, transitional and transactional approach to peace. As the first 5,000 Palestinian police prepare to deploy in the coming 60 days, the world is watching a radical experiment in nation building. Can $17 billion and a brigade of international troops turn the ruins of Rafah into the foundation of a new Middle Eastern metropolis? Or is the Board of Peace simply selling shares in a stability that has yet to arrive? Joining us now is Lev Aran, a Middle East commentator. He joins us live. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to talk to you here on this issue. Analysts and Donald Trump himself has positioned the Board of Peace as an alternative to the United Nations, yet critics argue this sidesteps decades of international law. By bypassing the UN's infrastructure, do we risk creating a governance vacuum where the reconstruction is seen as a private venture rather than a legitimate humanitarian effort?
Thank you very much for hosting me. Of course, if you ignore the United Nations, you change the way that America and the free world treated the international community. But I believe that as far as Israel is concerned, it is good news because the United Nations were ineffective or very hostile to Israel, sometimes also to the United States. And if we really want to see Gaza blooming, if we really want to see all the refugees back to Gaza and so on, I think there is some kind of a consensus that the UN simply cannot do this.
And we're also seeing a combined $7 billion pledge from nations like the United Arab Emirates, Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Historically, these states have been wary of being the world's ATM for Gaza without a clear political horizon. In this new transactional model, what are these regional powers getting in return, and are their contributions conditional on the involvement of the Palestinian Authority?
I believe that Palestinian Authority officially will be there, and on paper it will have the sovereignty. But again, the Palestinian Authority is both venal and corrupt. And for the last 30 years, all the rupees, dollars, and that they got, they simply disappeared. And you could not see that Gaza or the West Bank really become better and better. Now, most of the Muslim countries that are in this initiative, they're quite pro-Israeli: Kosovo, Albania, Emirates, Morocco, and so on. So Turkey right now, Turkish troops will not be there. Qatar is bad news for Israel, but otherwise, I believe it will be de facto non-Palestinian Authority, and the jure, they will be inside.
And another key point of the Board of Peace, the International Stabilization Force. It aims to deploy 20,000 soldiers from nations like Indonesia and Morocco. How can this force effectively manage the amnesty for weapons program and maintain order without being perceived by the local population as a secondary occupying force, especially if they're forced into direct kinetic confrontations with remaining militant cells?
This is like a nightmarish Herculean task for the 20,000 soldiers. It will be very hard. By the way, this is what Turkey says. Turkey says if you really want Gaza to be stabilized, if you really want a deal with Hamas, that Hamas will be much weakened and only a political force, you have to have me inside, because the Indonesians or the soldiers from Kosovo, they will not be able to do this. So right now it is a very hard task, but if Hamas understands that there is some kind of a global consensus that they must give their weapons back, maybe there is a chance, who knows.
And the board's charter reportedly gives President Trump veto power and personal authority over its decisions. If the US political landscape shifts, or if the 10-day ultimatum for regional compliance fails, what happens to the billions pledged in private investment? Is peace through prosperity sustainable if it is tied to the political life of a single administration?
Look, Trump put more money than all the other players together. As far as I know, like 10 out of $17 billion. And anyway, Trump will not initiate anything that he's not the boss. These are the rules of the game. We like it or we don't like it, it doesn't matter right now. So I think one lesson, even from the first tenure of Trump, that the Republican administration has learned is that if it's like the UN, it will become like a circus, okay? Many small countries, radical countries, they will run the show. Once the psychological agreement between everybody is that Trump is the big boss, maybe some stability will be there. Again, Trump is not very stable himself, not very predictable himself, but maybe if we see the alternative, it is the best that we can get in Gaza right now.
Lev Aran, thank you so much for taking the time in joining us here on the broadcast. Pleasure to talk to you as always.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, that wraps up this edition of Deep Dive. Stay tuned on NewsX World for more news and updates.